Let's look at the answers for our roles and permissions quiz. For question 1, where can users assign a default user role when logging into NetSuite? Well, you could do that by navigating to the Choose Role page and then checking the default checkbox next to the role that you want to auto assign as your default for login. Question 2, which standard NetSuite user role is required to use two-factor authentication? The answer is administrator, and that applies to any highly privileged role within NetSuite. For question 3, which of the following statements is true about global permissions? Well, we know that when you apply global permissions, they override role-based permissions. So any user role permissions that are applied at the role level will be overridden by those applied through global permissions on the employee record. For question 4, this was a great question for those of you that have been into Suite Answers and looked for the complete list of out-of-the-box NetSuite permissions. And the name of the Excel file is NetSuite Permissions Usage. That one might have caught a few of you out. So the next question, which user role types can never access Sandbox? Now, seeing as Sandbox is always going to be an internal environment, you would not want your customers to access that. So the correct answer here is the customer center. For question 6, which of these is not an available subsidiary restriction? So there was a bit of a red herring here. The correct answer is accessible subsidiaries include children is not an available option on the user role. It is, however, an option on a GL account record. So that might have thrown you off. Question 7, we're looking at a kind of unique scenario here. Employee A and employee B both have a custom role that give them the create permission for sales orders. But we've gone ahead and updated the global permissions for employee A to give them edit permission to sales orders. So which of the following statements is true? Well, now employee B can continue to create sales orders through their user role, but employee A can now create and edit sales orders because of that global permission override that we've applied. For question 8, which of these preferences cannot be applied to new users added to a custom user role? Well, you can add use classic interface if you want to force your users to use the classic center, regardless of the role that they have been assigned. But use support interface is not a valid option, and that's why that's the correct answer. For question 9, which of these user roles cannot be modified through the Manage Roles page in NetSuite? Well, that's going to be your out-of-the-box roles. So some of you may have gone with administrator and system administrator, but you can customize system administrator. What you cannot customize and what is not available is the NetSuite Support Center and the NetSuite Support Center Basic. Those are out-of-the-box user roles that cannot be customized in NetSuite. Question 10, which user role or user roles can edit locked cases? So for those of you using case management in NetSuite, you'll know that only a NetSuite administrator can do that. For question 11, what permission level do you need for an underlying record type in order to be able to view or review a workflow associated with that record type? This may come as a shock to those of you that aren't as closely working with workflows, but you do need the full level permission just to be able to view a corresponding workflow. As an example, let's say you create a invoice approval workflow in NetSuite, and you want to be able to view that workflow, not edit, not create, but just view that workflow. You need full level permission to the invoice record in the system, which gives you, obviously the ability to delete invoices in the system, but that is needed in order to view the workflow. The workflow is viewed as, administrative and administrative right in NetSuite, and therefore you need full access to view that. For question 12, when would a user be asked to answer a security question before they can log into NetSuite? Well, like many applications, not just NetSuite, you're going to be challenged on that when you're using a new device to access the application. Question 13 is more focused on permissions within FAM, or the fixed asset module. So if you have restricted the ability to reject proposals in your NetSuite environment, only NetSuite admins can actually go ahead and perform that. It's restricted to all other users. Question 14. When might you need to create a non-SSO user role in your sandbox account for an equivalent user role with SSO in your production account? And if you take a look at all of the answers here, they're actually all reasons that you would want to create a non-single sign-on user role in your sandbox account. So they are all correct. Which of these attributes cannot be changed when editing an existing custom role? So most of you should be familiar with this, that is the center type. As soon as you hit save on that user role, the center type is locked down and cannot be changed. So make sure you get that right when you're creating new user roles in the system. Question 16. What is the only permission level available when granting the user role permission persist search? So for persist search, this is a functionality in NetSuite that enables you to run saved searches in the background or asynchronously. And I think you can do it for up to 3 hours. And then it's going to give you those results in a CSV file. And so the ability to do that in NetSuite is with the persist search permission, but the role level assigned to that is create. So the only option you have is create. There's no edit, full, or view for persist search. And then a similar question, what's the only permission level available when you want someone to be able to view the login audit trail? I think this is another one where it's considered more of an administrative duty, and so you do need full access for the view login audit trail. It's the only option available. So if you need someone to manage that, they need access to that permission with the full level. Question 18. So you have a user in your NetSuite environment, and they need the ability to modify an exchange rate on a transaction. Perhaps they are recording a payment through the bank that has been transacted in a foreign currency. Well, in order to modify that exchange rate, they will need to be granted edit level permission to the currency permission on their user role. And in doing so, you've given them the ability to modify the exchange rate on the transaction so they can perform their day-to-day duties. However, you have also given them permission to create new currency records in the system. In that sense, the currency permission itself in NetSuite is kind of dual. It has multi-purpose in that sense. So you do need to be careful for any user role permissions in NetSuite that are kind of multifaceted and control different areas of the system. Question 19. Which of the following is the best method? So emphasis on the best for limiting a user role to a specific custom form within NetSuite. Now, in theory, all of these can be done, but the best method is to use the restricted checkbox under the Customize Role Forms page. This is going to limit the form to that user role. And as new forms are added and customized in your NetSuite environment, the user with that role is still going to be forced to use this one specific custom form. Some of the other options, you would have to go back into the user role and reconfigure it to make sure that the correct form is set by default. And last but not least, which of the following use cases can only be met by using custom user role configuration without any custom development, Suite script, Suite flow? And the answer is the ability to use the same custom role for all sales reps and automatically limit what they can see to their own subsidiary. And you would do that using the subsidiary settings through the user role configuration.